There's something missing. There just is. There's something missing. I was looking through the book here, and they're missing something. They're missing something pretty critical. Now, what I'm about to say is directly related to the learner, and who the learner is. And they did, in fact, talk about the affects of the learner. Affects meaning their emotional state, their physical state, their condition, their psychological affect towards what's happening in the classroom. Where are they psychologically? Did they just break up with their boyfriend? Are they hungry? Do they generally hate this subject and they already have a built-in bias against it? Did a brother or sister have this class and they hated it? Are they so distracted right now because the girl that they like finally talked to them that they can't even think straight? Where are they? What is their history? What is their background? What is their cultural affluences? And I've noticed, at least around here, there are different academic priorities amongst the different ethnic groups, and how the home works into the affect of the learner is a pretty big deal, and it's oftentimes not looked at that much. And although I think teachers would identify it, they would know if they sat down and go, oh yeah, that's generally probably true. And there's always exceptions, of course. But I notice that there are certain ethnic groups that have a propensity to behave a certain way when it comes to learning, or when it comes to homework, or when it comes to their level of respect for the teacher, regardless of whether or not they like the subject. So knowing the sort of the foundation that they have when they come into the classroom is pretty critical. What they don't address is something that I think even the kids wouldn't even identify. And I'm going to see if you can identify it. When you were growing up, how many phone numbers, contacts did you have to memorize? Well, you didn't have cell phones back then, so pretty much, unless you had a date book, how many did you store? Home, a couple of friends, maybe mom's work number, dad's work number, so maybe 5, 6. There are so many contacts right now that these kids have to manage that they can't be managed mentally. Let me ask you another question. Based on, let's say a week, or let's back it up, even a day. How many social contacts did you make in a day? How many different people did you talk to? How many stories did you have to keep track of on a daily basis based on how many people you talk to? Because everybody you interact with has a different story, a different thing that they have with just you. It's their personal story with you. Your mom, you talk to your brother, sister, somebody at school, a couple teachers. So, you're talking what? Maybe 25, 30 people, if that. I mean, that's a lot. That would be a very social person. Now, let's take your average high school kid. And you have to include Twitter, texting, Facebook, phone calls, personal face-to-face interaction, and the number goes into the hundreds of people that they interact with. Hundreds. And how often does that input come to them? Okay, let's try another example. Take movies when you were growing up. And everybody's kind of different age here, but here's an example. And it's an extreme example, I realize, but let's take cartoons, for example. Remember what the first cartoon was? It's called Steamboat Willie. It's produced by Walt Disney. And Steamboat Willie was a short black and white cartoon. How often did the camera switch to show you something new? Like switch angles. Show you a different angle of Mickey Mouse cruising around on the river in Steamboat. Well, if you look it up on YouTube, you'll notice that the camera positions change every 7 to 10 seconds. And they provide something new for you to look at. So count yourself. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, and so forth, until you get to 7. Imagine looking at the same thing for 7 seconds. Then look up like an action-adventure movie, like The Bourne Supremacy, or Star Wars for that matter. And then check and count in a 60-second period of time how many times the camera changes position to show you something new. Well, I did this study with another cartoon that was done in probably the mid-2000s. His name was Johnny Phantom. And on average, over a 7-minute period of this cartoon, the cut rate, the rate at which the camera stops and then shows you something new, was somewhere in the neighborhood of about 0.7 seconds. Think about what that does and how much information is being thrown at you per unit time. How much new information your brain is processing per unit time. Your brain loves it. Loves it. Yeah, feed me more. And the reason why it didn't happen then is because it was an enormous amount of work to edit something. I mean, the brain really hasn't changed that much. It still loves tons of input and stimulation, but now we're spoon feeding it to them. Then you add that on top of the internet where you can click and change channels a billion times a second. I mean, most kids, when they're studying, they've got their computer on with about 6 or 7 different tabs open. Their text, their phone next to them. There's usually a game station thing on. There's 15 different things going on at the same time. And while they're used to this, it's not conducive for concentration, but it is conducive for what your brain loves, and that's lots and lots of activity. We've bred a nation of, we'll call, selectively attention deficits. Sad. And it kind of is. It kind of is. So we have neurologically programmed people to want and need constant stimulation. Whether or not the neurological inputs in the brain actually physically, the input when you get that when you're young, physically creates that. Because my wife, who's Russian, says, and I don't mean to be offensive, but I love doing this because if she sees it, she's going to go nuts. She's going to, there's no such thing as ADD in Soviet Union. Russia. Depends on what I'm referencing. But there wasn't. And they had a really good education system. And we don't right now. Are we catering too much to this? And I've seen teachers that have done this where they've said, well, we're not presenting the information in the class at the rate at which the kids are used to. So when they see it coming at them, see the curriculum, this designed curriculum coming at them, it's not coming at them at the rate that they're comfortable with. So they mentally check out to try to keep themselves stimulated and interested. And they don't even know they're doing it. Imagine that you're used to driving 60, 70 miles an hour, and suddenly now you're driving behind a truck that is, let's say, going at 40 on the freeway. And you're like, yeah, I gotta get past. And you're weaving back and forth, trying to find a way to get around it. And eventually you do, throttle it, boom, and you're gone. But in the meantime, you're going nuts in your head. Do you really have to be there that fast? No, but you've been trained to want to be there that fast. And so we have this weird condition that we've sort of neurologically wired into the youth of America, and this willful need for information. Now, it could be a huge benefit, but none of the schools, well, I should say none, but most of the schools don't know how to design curriculum for this. They do not know how to design curriculum and use that process to engage a media-saturated, attention-lacking community. These are unlike any learners we've ever seen before. And as we go through this class, I want you to be innately keen on the concept that these are unlike any learners we've ever seen, and they're not you. And so the greatest challenge that if you can overcome is if you can possibly, maybe, try and overcome how you learn, because teachers have a tendency to teach how they were taught. And for you to break out of that is going to take an enormous amount of effort. And it takes an enormous amount of effort to build curriculum like that. If you watched the video earlier about the space thing and trying to teach planets, if you hold on tight, and I think maybe on down the line, a few weeks from now, I'll share with you something called Boldly Going. It was a 3-year project. It involved, I paid for most of the materials, and I had some people, give me stuff for free. But if you would have paid for this straight up, it would have been about $40,000 worth of investment money to build this thing. It's called Boldly Going. I'll show you some screenshots of it, and I'll give you some explanation on how this worked. But what it did is, imagine Boldly Going was a lot like a space CSI episode that happened to have sex with a video game, and the birth of what came out of it was the most dynamic learning experience that the school, the district, the state, as a matter of fact, Boldly Going won a national award for technology and science design. National award winning, was the best in the middle school in the whole country in 2003. And that was the version that sucked. I bet you're curious. Well, it's good, because curiosity means I got your attention. So hold on, come back to these things, and I'll show you this thing a little bit at a time and show you that you don't need an enormous amount of technology and crap, because I happen to be a space nerd, and I always wanted to be Captain Kirk. So I built a spaceship in my classroom with the captain's chair and the whole thing. I built the bridge in my room, and then built an entire learning unit around it so that I could be the captain. It's a little narcissistic, but it was motivating. And I'll share it with